Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince and Other Writings. And Hedwig is already being a bully to Gladiator. So, there's that. We're in chapter 22 on those whom princes have as secretaries. Let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The choosing of ministers is a matter of no little importance for a prince. They are either good or not, depending on the prudence of the prince. The first conjecture that one makes of a ruler's intelligence comes from seeing the men he has about him. Ooh, ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? And when they are capable and loyal, one may consider him wise because he knows how to recognize their ability to keep them loyal. So keeping ability to keep them loyal. But when they are otherwise, one may always make a negative judgment of him because the first mistake one makes is made in the choice of ministers. There was no one who knew Messer Antonio da Venafro, Messer Antonio da Venafro, the minister of Pandolfo Petrucci, Prince of Siena, who did not judge Pandolfo to be a very worthy man for having him as his minister. And there are three kinds of brains. The one understands things on its own. The other discerns that which others understand. The third understands neither by itself nor through others. Okay, I think I'm the second one. Discerns that which others understand. I think I'm that one. Therefore, it necessarily had to be the case that if Pandolfo was not in the first group, he was in the second. For whenever someone has enough judgment to recognize the good or evil that a person does or says, even if he lacks imaginative power, he will still recognize the bad deeds as well as the good ones of his minister, and he will extol the latter and correct the others. So extol the good deeds, correct the others, nor can the minister hope to deceive him, and he will therefore be on his best behavior. So, best behavior. When they can't deceive. The children took some of my cooking pots and are pretending to cook, so there might be some noise of pots and pans clanking. But as to how a prince, they're playing with toys. Like, they took my real pans and, they're boiling stuff. Pretend, right? But as to how a prince may know his minister, there is this method, which never fails. When you see that your minister thinks more of himself than you, and that in all his actions he pursues his own self-interests, a man such as that will never be a good minister, nor will you ever be able to trust yourself to him. For the man who has the state of another in his hands must never think of himself, but always of his prince. How do you make them do that? And must never think about anything except what concerns his prince. So really, someone who wants to serve. And on the other side, the prince must think about how to keep his minister good, honoring him, enriching him, making him feel a sense of obligation. Oh, cool. Okay, we're seeing here. Okay. Honoring him. Okay, let's give a business example. I was at a job once, and they told me when I was hired, like, oh, if you're the employee, the best employee for this long, you get to go to the ranch that the company owned, and you get to have a barbecue and all this stuff. And they made all these grand promises. And then I was like, oh wow, so working good, working good. And then I found out that they don't even do that anymore. And that just the corporate echelons get to go to the ranch. And I was very disappointed. And they never, like, when it came to food, we would be kicking our asses. We would be working hard getting the food out to the customers, like on hot days. Like, it's a rush constantly. And then there was like the kids menu, like had a cheeseburger and French fries. And if you wanted to add stuff, they charge you. Like, if you want to add avocado, like they charge you. It's like they nickel and dime us, but we just made them tons of profits, and we get the bare bones. And then they wonder why employees steal food and, you know, give discounts to customers and give free things to customers because they want to get more of a tip, because the tip goes to us. So we hurt the business by cutting its profits and giving free things to the customers who will then reward us for what we gave them. You know, when you give your coworkers, I mean, not your coworkers, when you give your employees like company shirts, you have a Christmas party, you have some types of bonuses, even because we're Muslims, so we don't do Christmas, but I'm trying to show you the example. A company party, a company something, where you reward your employees consistently for their labor and don't take advantage of them. Those go a long way. And so when he talks about how you would honor someone, that's important. Okay? Because you want to keep your employees good. Because I saw employees, I made this mistake. I would go into a new job, and I could see where people were purposely being deceptive and where they weren't doing their job, and I would report thefts. So I was given the key to the wine room, and that was a privilege, right? You had to be very trustworthy because there's expensive wines there, and the boss isn't always there to catch anyone's putting a bottle of, you know, $200 wine in their backpack. But there was a time when I was in the back storage room and someone had hidden a bottle, like, that was from upstairs, you know. And this was kind of before he was strict with the keys. And clearly this person was trying to stash it so that he could have it later, and I gave it to the boss. And some people were like, oh, you're a snitch, you're this, you're that. But I wanted to just make everything smooth, you know, because if you allow too much crime around you, it'll sweep you away. And I wasn't always rewarded for that goodness, and I'm not saying I deserved to necessarily be rewarded, because I don't have an affection for criminals, you know. But it would be nice if the bosses saw, like, the workers, the bus boys, like, say they're kicking their butts, they're working hard, you should give them something off the regular menu instead of forcing us to eat off the kids menu, instead of charging us for mayonnaise, instead of charging us for salsas. Like, whatever it is, you're just nickel and diming us, trying to make a profit off of us. In some places, they only give you 50% off. And it's like, no, we should eat free. We should eat free. Your business can only function because of the workers. Okay? And you can't have it to where managers can eat multiple times a day, whatever they want, and have large portions, while we have to pay 50%, or we have a menu that is very trashy. My favorite style was family meal, as in the chefs make, here's a large tray of one food, here's a large tray of this, this, and that, and it's like a buffet, and you scoop and put it on your plate. We're all equal here. That's what I liked. You know? But rewarding people for being good, your employees will keep them good, inshallah. And if one employee is bad, you don't get jaded and then say, we're not doing this anymore because one employee didn't appreciate it, you know? Like, some places they won't let their employees take food to go. And it's like, why? Oh, because some people were stealing taking food to go. And it's like, okay, so your employees can literally buy full price, but they can't take it to go? Are you insane? So if they want to bring their kids something home, you know, that's something that I like with my husband. He'll bring something home because he works in landscaping, but he also works in restaurants. And he'll bring something home, and that's nice. But some places, they won't let you do that. And then you start to hate those bosses. And just look at your own life at that example. How many people you saw working so hard, and the company didn't give a damn, and then that company wonders why they're losing profits, why their employees purposely work slow and sabotaging from within, right? Must think about how to keep his minister good, honoring him, enriching him, making him feel a sense of obligation. So Caesar had a way of doing that. And you can look into different rulers and how they... Oh, like, think about how the caliphs... Like, how... Like, hey, you're the governor of this land. I'm gonna marry so-and-so. This is an obligation. It's an alliance, right? Sharing honors, family bloodlines, and responsibilities governing in the empire, so that the minister recognizes that he cannot survive without the prince. So you want them to know they can't have it very well if they go. And so that his many honors do not make him desire yet more honors. His great riches do not make him desire yet more riches. And his many responsibilities make him fear changes. When therefore ministers and princes, with regard to the relationship between them, are made thus, they can have confidence in another. And when it is otherwise, the outcome will always be harmful for one or the other. There you go. There you go. I think that's very smart. Chapter 23. How flatterers are to be avoided. Let's begin. I do not want to leave out an important subject, an error from which princes have difficulty defending themselves unless they are very prudent and have good judgment. And these are the flatterers of which courts are full. Okay, so a prince has difficulties defending themselves if they're, because, you know, you're indulging, like, oh, thank you, stop it, oh my gosh, I don't know. Brown nosers, we call it. Brown nosers. Fascinatingly, though, I didn't get along with a lot of flatterers in the restaurant industry. They would talk trash about the boss. Boss comes in, and then they're the first ones there. How was the golfing this weekend? Yeah, it was good. Yeah, I know. How are the kids doing? And you're like, you snake. You gotta watch out. And then you would see these bosses just like suck it up, and you'd be like, does this person really not have the ability to see that this guy is all garbage? Unless, okay, so prudence, and have good judgment, so good judgment. And these are flatterers of which courts are full, because men are so pleased with their own affairs, deceiving themselves about them. They defend themselves from this plague with difficulty. Plague. Flatterers are a plague. But wishing to defend themselves against it, they run the risk of becoming contemptible. So don't become contemptible, for there is no other way to guard oneself against flattery than by making men understand that they will not offend you by telling you the truth. Ooh, so truth-telling. Balance. Think about it. Okay, if you tell someone a minor criticism, banned, you did, and they're like, okay, alright, I'm not going to tell you anything. And then the only route left for people to get close to you is through flattery and stroking your ego, and then to become yes men and drones, and now you're surrounded by empty-headed parrots. No offense to my parrots. But yeah, there's a balance there. But when every person can tell you the truth, you lose respect. Now that's the tricky part. So, oh, that's tricky. So if no one can tell you the truth, there will be too much flattery. If everyone tells you the truth, well, now they lost respect because now that anyone can disrespect you. So maybe it's about tone, measure. Therefore, a prudent prince must hold to a third course, by choosing wise men for his government, and giving them alone complete liberty to speak the truth to him. Okay, so wise men. So like a small council. And only of those things that he asks about, of nothing else. So only things that you ask about. Only things you ask about. Because if they start to like just often, like you didn't even ask and they're just like coming at you, now they've kind of lost the fear. But he must ask them about everything and hear their opinions. So you must ask frequent questions. You must utilize them as a resource as well. That's what he's saying. Afterwards, he should deliberate by himself on his own. So, deliberate on his own. So, self-reflection. And with these counsels, and with each of these men, he should comport himself in such a way that everyone recognizes that the more freely they speak, the more acceptable they will be to him. Aside from these men, he should not desire to hear anyone, should carry out what he has deliberated on, and should be steady in his deliberations. Steady in deliberations. Steady in his one's deliberations. Whoever acts otherwise either throws himself down, exposed to the flatterer, or he changes his mind as often as opinions vary. Ooh. Look at that. Changing your mind as often as the wind blows. Avoid frequent swaying mind changes. Mind, opinion changes. With the result that he gets little respect. Yes. Grifters do that. Man, that's like Pearl Davis. Always changing her mind, always switching up the rhetoric. You gotta be careful, man. All of us in our daily life. Now, you're allowed to change your mind, but if you're like crusading for a topic, and then you flip, and then you crusade for another topic, and then you flip, and then you just become wishy-washy. You're not really solid in your opinions, and you just milk them for whatever they're worth, and then change later on if it's, oh, I'm hungry. If the opinion is something that'll benefit you. In this connection, I want to adduce a modern example. Father Luca, a servant of Maximilian, the present emperor, speaking of his majesty, said that the emperor never took counsel with anyone and never did anything in his own way, which arose from his following a method contrary to the one mentioned above. For the emperor is a secretive man, does not communicate his designs to anyone, does not take advice about them, but when people start to notice and understand those as they are being put into effect, then those whom the emperor has about him begin to criticize them, and he is easily swayed. Okay, so once he sees people critiquing it, then they're usually swayed. So think about this, and you'll see these with people. Mirroring emotions, I think, is a technique. This is how you know someone's fake as hell. When you're talking and you start to say your opinion, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I totally got it, yeah, no, yeah, for real." And you could see, like, this happened recently. A lady was like, "Oh, I don't like Trump, this or that," and then my kid cut in and said like, "Oh, did you hear what happened? Like with the assassination tape?" And then she goes like, "Oh yeah, like no one deserves for that to happen to them." Like you can see someone self-censor and change based on where the room is going. That's different than reading the room and minding your tongue, right? Like if I'm in a room filled with blue-haired feminists, I may just be quiet and let them talk and then respond to what specifically they are saying, rather than me go in there and try to stir up a storm, you know? There's a balance, right? There's a balance. It's diverted from them. So if people can see that as soon as someone gives you pushback, you drop your opinion and switch to their side, you can't have respect. But when you, and I did this in the past where I've held the line, like, no, I don't agree with that. And people will insult me, troll me. Like, now I'm shadow banned, so I don't really have that problem. People kind of forgot about me and moved on. But there was a time when people would just rail against me, make up lies on Twitter, and just go off the rails. But then I would see comments where people would say, huh, she's very firm in her beliefs, and I can respect her for that. Because I held the line. You're not gonna shame me into your opinion. You can call me every name in the book. That's not gonna make me think that your argument is right. It's fascinating. You'll get people who will all be like, this is what I think X, Y, and Z. And like, you're an effing Riz, you're this, you're that. And it's like, okay, this has nothing to do with the argument. You're not making a point. You're not persuading me of your ideas. You're stupid. And it's like, okay. Well, you have a good day now. And I'm not going to be diverted from something just because you criticize my idea. That's just, I'm not a people pleaser at all. If I was, I would probably gone, and I could probably manipulate people into, getting into a position of power. Because if you're a people pleaser, you're the snake, you're the chameleon. There's that song, Cama, 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 camaleón. Yo soy un camaleón. It's like a Spanish corrido, a Mexican corrido. And when you're a chameleon, you're a shapeshifter. You mirror people's emotions and you change to how they want you to be so you can manipulate them. That's bad. So people think what cancel culture makes people better. You're just teaching them how to be more master manipulators like Mr. Beast. As a result of this, what he does one day, he undoes the next. And no one ever understands what he wants or what he plans to do. And one cannot rely on his deliberations. Exactly. One cannot rely on his deliberations. A prince, therefore, must always take counsel, but when he wants to, no, not when others want to. On the contrary, he must discourage anyone from advising him on any matter unless he asks him about it. But he must certainly be a greater asker of questions. So the balance here, right? So we can give counsel in public and private as Muslims. And there is a bit of a manipulation people were used to in the past with me. I'm giving you nasiha. And in reality, they just want to appear smarter than you. They want to appear better than you in the comments, and they're trying to undermine you by being a contrarian to troll. That's not genuine, right? And they're correcting you in order to show where they are. They're interrupting you to show you where they think you stand and where they stand. But a genuine person can ask a question for clarification, and then we ourselves, that's why I like philosophy, is you're questioning, like, can you deliberate this, or can you explain that, or what do you mean by this? This is how I came to this conclusion. But people are very impatient now. They don't want to do that. They don't want to ask questions. They just want to assume. And then a patient hearer of the truth concerning the things he has asked about. Exactly. Some people will ask you a question and they don't pay attention to the answer. Indeed, when he understands that someone, for whatever scruple, is not telling him the truth, he should become angry. And although many think that a prince who creates the impression of being prudent is so reputed, not because of his nature, but because of the good counselors he has around him, without a doubt they deceive themselves, for this is the general rule which never fails. A prince who is not wise in his own right cannot be well advised. Dang, man, that's true. Unless by chance he has put himself entirely in the hands of one single person who, governing him in everything, was a very prudent man. So you may be a complete, dolt, but if the hand of you, your right-hand man, is able to be like, hey man, I'll be your compass, well, you can survive. In this case, he might do well, and he would not last long, for that governor would in short time take his state away from him. So if you are someone who rules and you're not very wise and you always have to defer to everyone else to decide stuff for you, eventually they're going to take away your position. That's what he's saying. But by getting counsel from more than one person, a prince who is not wise will never get unanimous advice, nor will he be able to put it all together by himself. So putting all the different advices together and synthesizing it and then extracting which ones we think work and which ones apply and which ones don't, each one will think of his own interest, nor will the prince know how either to correct or to understand them, and one cannot find counselors who are otherwise. For men will always turn out badly for you unless by some necessity they are made good. Therefore, to conclude, good counsel from whomever it may come must necessarily arise from the prudence of the prince, and not the prince's prudence from the good counsel. Would you look at that? That's a very educational reading. I really like that one. Excuse me. It really makes you think about what we are to do and what it means to really be in a position where you have to take counsel but not be too wishy-washy. Well, that's a good section, man. I'll tell you that. Chapter 24. Why the princes of Italy have lost their states. The things written above, if prudently observed, make a new prince seem an old one, and render him immediately more secure and unshakable in his state than if he had been in it a long time. For the actions of a new prince are watched much more than those of an hereditary one, and when they are recognized as virtuous, they attract men much more and bind them much more to him than ancient blood would do, for men are much more taken by present matters than by past ones. And when they find things good in the present, they enjoy them and seek nothing more. On the contrary, they will seek out every way possible to defend him as long as the prince himself does not fail in other things. And so he will have the double glory of having established a new principality, and adorned it and strengthened it with good laws, good arms, and good friends, and good examples, just as that other man will be doubly shamed because, having been born a prince, he lost his state because of insufficient prudence. So, adorned with good laws, good arms. So notice he's not. A lot of people pretend like peace means you don't have a military. It's just not true. Good friends, good examples. So really focusing on the good. So I'm going to write the good. And if one considers those rulers in Italy who have lost their states in our times, such as the King of Naples, the Duke of Milan, and others, one will find them, first, a common defect with regard to arms. The gladiator just took one of his little food bowls down, and he's like picking up and spilling the seeds in this cage. For the reasons that were discussed at length above, then it will be seen that some of them either had the people as their enemy, or if they had the people as their friends, they did not know how to secure themselves against the nobility. Okay, so the people as their enemy, And then the other problem was they didn't know how to secure themselves against the nobility. So nobles, the plebs. For without these defects, the states are not lost that have enough strength to keep an army in the field. Philip of Macedonia, that's the dad of Alexander the Great. Oh, there's another Philip. He just said right here, Philip of Macedonia, not the father of Alexander the Great, but the one who was conquered by Titus Quintius. Oh, my bad. Dang, I didn't know there was more than one Philip of Macedonia. Someone should change their name. My bad. But the one who was conquered by Titus Quintus did not have much of state compared to the grandeur of the Romans of Greece, which attacked him nevertheless, because he was a military man who knew how to keep hold onto the people and secure himself against the nobility. He sustained the war against the Romans for many years. And if at the end he lost control of several cities, his kingdom nevertheless remained his. So, this makes me think about how we are not supposed to rebel against the Muslim rulers, from what I've learned. And the Hadith is quite clear, but I know it's a big topic that everyone gets pissy about. But if a non-Muslim comes and is trying to get the Muslims to rebel against the Khalifa, Amir al-Mu'mineen, then that would be bad. The Caliph, if he knows the Muslims won't turn against him, he'll have less of a he most likely won't lose his position. So if the nobles and the people don't rebel against the Muslim ruler, this secures his empire from foreign invasion and foreign interference. So loyalty to Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is what this is making me think about. Therefore, these princes of ours, who have been in their principalities for many years, have then lost them, should not blame fortune, but rather their own indolence. Blame their own indolence, for never having thought in quiet times that things might change, which is a common defect in men, not to reckon on storms in a calm. Not to reckon on storms in a calm. When adverse times arrived, they only thought of fleeing and not of defending themselves. And they hoped that the people, tired of the insolence of the conquerors, would recall them. This policy, when others are lacking, is good, but it is truly bad to have abandoned the other remedies for this one. For one should never wish to fall down in the belief that you will find someone to pick you up. Oh, that is so true. Self-preservation, man. You can't just be thinking that someone's going to come save you. This either does not happen, or if it does not make for your security, since that defense was cowardly and did not depend on your own forces. And only those defenses are good, are certain, are enduring, that depend on you yourself and your ability. So your ability, not the ability of others. Nice. Chapter 25. How much fortune can do in human affairs, and how she is to be resisted. It is not unknown to me how many have held and hold the opinion that the things of this world are governed by fortune and by God in such a way that men with their prudence cannot control them. Indeed, that there is no remedy for them whatsoever, and for this reason they would conclude that one should not sweat much about things. So, just leave it all up to God, I'm not going to sweat it. But for us Muslims, we tie our camels. But should let oneself be ruled by chance. This opinion has more credibility in our times because of the great varying of affairs that has been seen in every day, which goes beyond all human conjecture. When I think about this at times, I am inclined to share this opinion of theirs to a certain extent, nevertheless, so that our free will may not be extinguished. Our free will. I think it may be true that fortune is the arbiter of half of our actions, but that she still leaves the other half of them. more or less, to be governed by us. So they call like fortune in this female sense, but I think you would just say the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I compared her to one of these destructive rivers that, when they are raging, flood the plains, destroy trees and buildings, take up earth from this side and place it on the other. Everyone flies before them. Everyone yields to their onslaught without being able to oppose them in any way. And although this is how they are, it does not follow, therefore, that men, when times are quiet, cannot make provision against them with dikes and embankments, so that when they rise again, either they would go into a canal, or their impetus would not be so wild or destructive. This is a great point. So, rivers, floods, dikes, embankments, infrastructure. Okay, so preparing in times of peace. Something to think about. So he mentioned earlier, to be able to reflect on the storm even when there isn't a storm, right? So when times are easy, you still think about what must be done. Security mindset, right? You live in a peaceful community. You don't just let your guard down and think it's everyone else's job to keep your community safe, but rather you always stay on with your head on a swivel, never really letting your guard down, but always being very aware. Like when women will go and run and they put their headphones in and they don't really ever look behind them that much. You should. You don't know who could be telling you. You never know. You have to be careful. And so when he talks about the flooding, how destructive the floods are on these rivers, well, you don't try to build the remedy while it's happening, but you try to be preventative. So proactive versus reactive, offensive versus defensive. It happens similarly with fortune. She shows her power where there is no force, virtue organized to resist her, and directs her onslaught there where she knows that no embankments and dikes have been made to hold her. And if you consider Italy, which is the locus of these changes, and the one who has set them in motion, you will see that it is a countryside without embankments and without any dikes at all. And for if it has been defended by the necessary valor, so valor, virtue, as Germany, Spain, and France are, this flood would not have caused the great changes that it has, or it would not have come upon us at all. And let this be enough to have said in general about opposing fortune. To be prepared, to be wise, be steadfast. Looking for weak spots, trying to mend it, trying to fortify. But limiting myself more to particulars, I say that one sees this prince, prosperous today and ruined tomorrow, without having seen him change his nature or any one of his traits. Changing his nature or traits? I believe this arises first from the causes that have already been discussed at length. That is, that a prince who relies entirely on fortune comes to ruin as she changes. I also believe that the man who adapts his mode of proceeding to the nature of the times will prosper. And so adapting your mode and how you proceed due to the nature that is existing at the moment. And similarly, that the man whose mode of proceeding is not in accord with the times will not prosper. Oh. I don't think he's saying go with the flow, but tradition versus modernity. But on a smaller scale, it's like, how will you proceed, and what is the way in which they do things? So, if you're in a place where, yeah, but it depends, right? Because you could see how it could go both ways. Like, okay, we hang people here who do a certain deed. That's how we proceed. Proceed with carrying out the sentence. And someone will say, oh, and you go to another community, like, well, we don't do that here. We put them on a plank cross, and then we let the tide drown them. And it's like, oh, okay. And then you have like a liberal who'll be like, no, we let them go read books and the president, and they never have to work again. And they're like, okay, but see, that would be wrong. So sometimes couldn't you do something different in accordance? So I wonder, be the change maker, the trendsetter, to build a new way. It's not easy, but I do wonder what he means. For one sees that in those affairs which lead men to the end, which each one has in view, that is, to glory and riches, they get there in various ways. One with caution, okay, so caution. The other with impetuousness. One through violence. The other with cunning. One through patience. The other with its opposites, so impulsivity. And each using these diverse means can reach his goal. Okay, so the means. The means. Glory, riches, goals. So, the modes he described here. Let's read it again. Caution. Impetuousness. Okay, violence. Cunning. And then patience. Now, patience is mentioned often in the Quran. And then other with its... So opposite could be impulsivity, daringness, boldness. Synonyms for that. Fortune favors the bold. Right? So it falls on the vein of what he was talking about. Diverse means to reach your goal. I think if I was in my younger days, I would say violence. That's how you're going to get it. But violence has its setbacks. Prime example today, Israel is using violence to commit their genocide in order to get the territory, and the world is turning against them. They, and for us Muslims, we're called, like, on a separate vein, patience. But not confusing patience with delaying of action. This is fascinating if you look at how many times patience is mentioned in the Quran. To be steadfast is to be patient. So steadfastness. One also sees that of two cautious men, one succeeds with his designs. The other does not. And in the same way, two men succeed equally with two different procedures. One by being cautious, and the other impetuous. This arises from nothing other than the nature of the times, which are or are not in conformity with their course of action. So course of action conformity. From this results that which I have said, that two men operating differently obtain the same outcome. And if two men operating in the same way, one arrives at his goal and the other does not. This is really a good read, I must say. Really much enjoy it. We'll pause here, but I wanted to reiterate some of the things that we have learned, because this is just exceedingly helpful. Okay, so we talked about, secretaries, right? And that a ruler has to have the kind of brain that can discern information. So he mentioned there are 3 kinds of brains. The one understands things on its own. The other discerns that which others understand. The third understands neither by itself nor through others. And you can judge a ruler by those he keeps around him. Birds of a feather flock together. Okay? God, does he have an A-team? What does he have? And that you should keep your ministers good by honoring them, enriching them, making them feel a sense of obligation, and sharing honors and responsibilities with them. And that the ministers should be able to recognize that they cannot survive without the prince. The other point was how flatterers are to be avoided, okay? That it's difficult for princes to defend themselves against such a plague, but they should be prudent and have good judgment, okay? And that you want people to be able to tell you the truth so that you're not surrounded by flatterers, but you don't want it to where every person can tell you the truth because you lose respect. So you need to have a group of wise men who give you advice, but when you on stuff you ask them, and you should ask many questions. They should be able to freely speak, and they should feel like they're being accepted to speak, but you always have to watch it. And he also mentioned that you should not be the type of person whose mind changes like the wind. That you change your mind as often as opinions vary. That as soon as you get a little bit of pushback, you drop that idea and you're on to the next. You're wishy-washy. You're not firm in your beliefs. Okay? And that you must be patient hearing the truth of the things that you asked about. Okay? And then he mentioned good arms, good laws, and basically doing good, and how you will outshine the prince whose state and province you took. And then he mentioned again how the people need to like you. Are the people your enemy? How do you secure yourself against the nobility? And it's important to know that balance of the love of the people and the love of the nobles. He went in the previous chapters talking about the dangers of when the nobles turn against you and the dangers of when the people turn against you. So the art of statecraft is finding a way to make both of those groups happy. Okay? And that you shouldn't fall down believing someone will be there to pick you up. That's some solid advice. Solid advice. That you should be pro-reactive and not just reactive when it comes to preparing for fortune to turn. Okay? We have free will, but that he points out that you still have to prepare. He mentioned valor as well. Okay? Then he mentioned different ways in which you go to your goals. With caution, with impetuousness, through violence, through cunning, through patience, and with its opposites. So impulsivity, daringness, boldness, stuff like that. Very informative section. I really like this book because it makes you think, and if you really start looking around in your own life, you're like, oh, you'll see some business people talk about rewarding their good employees, but we have to do that in our own lives to make people feel valued, appreciated. Very interesting. I really like this section, as you can tell, and you can see why his works have lasted, and I enjoy reading it because people will use his name like spooky, but I asked myself, has this person actually read his stuff? Because he's not. He make him sound like he's a demonic monster who's like telling you to eat kittens or something. But in reality, if you read it, it's actually some real solid points here for us. You know? And they're like, oh, you have a Machiavellian mind. And it's like, can you explain further? If someone says that, say, can you explain, and can you use text references for what you're saying? So if someone accuses you of being Machiavellian, they're assuming this in a sort of spooky insult language. And if they've never actually read his works, then this is a toothless insult that doesn't make sense. Right? A lot of people do that. They use words like buzzwords, but they don't really have the sense to understand if they're applying it accurately. You know. But you know how it goes. You know how it goes. We take the time over here at Philosopher's Corner to read what people say before judging the work entirely and the individual entirely. Right? That's what we do. If you'd like to support my work, you can do so by going to www.subscribestar.com/MilahanArchive. Hope to see you there.